What's going on, brothers? JK Mazy here, founder and head coach at pornography.com, and today we're going to be talking about how you hurt others when you view pornography. Now, there is a prerequisite to actually getting through this video without getting too defensive or without getting pissed off. And that is accepting the fact that we may have told ourselves some stories about how our behavior, our very pleasurable behavior with watching pornography, does not hurt other people. That's the only thing I want you to be open-minded about as you move forward, because it is quite natural to feel defensive when you hear that something that you enjoy, something which relieves stress for you, something which is your only outlet for sex, might be hurting other people. And you might already be going like, okay, I'm defensive about whatever JK is going to talk about because it sounds like he's going to make me feel bad about something. That is not the case. This video is not about making you feel bad. It's about helping you realize that this thing that you have a compulsive behavior with not only creates victims out there in the world, but it makes you a victim yourself. And you can take this information and do what you want with it. Now, brother, whether you say that you have never paid for sex, whether you say that you have never paid for pornography and you only watch free pornography, whether you say that you have never sexually assaulted anyone or you've never done something illegal sexually, I want you to know that when you view pornography, you are hurting somebody. Your behavior with pornography has hurt somebody if, one, you watch pornography at all, whether it is free or paid. Number two, if you pay for sex, especially if you pay for it legally or illegally. Now, I will add one caveat here because there's a new area that's developing that I'm not sure about. But my intuition is that it's eventually going to fully fall into the category of paying for sex. And that is the sugar daddy dating game, where women online look for a man to support them financially. In some cases, it's not for sex, but in many cases, it is for sex. And the primary motivation is money for the women, and the primary motivation for the men is sex. So I know in society that falls within a very kind of gray area. But when we go back to traditional escorts and prostitutes, if you are paying for sex, then you are hurting others. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. If you are breaking commitments to friends, to family, to your career, to your business, because of your sexual behavior and because of pornography, you are hurting others. If you are making, or if you make your sexual satisfaction your number one priority, you are definitely hurting others. If you are missing meetings, if you are canceling meetups with your friends, if you're making all the major decisions in your life based on whether you're going to be sexually satisfied or not, then you're definitely hurting other people. So if you're that kind of guy who's just like, oh my God, there's access to sex, it doesn't matter whether you've had sex yesterday or the week before, but sex is involved in this, and sex becomes your number one priority, even if it has to do with going to a business meeting, going on a trip with friends, moving to a particular area. It's all about, well, how much sex can I get in this area? Then you are definitely hurting others. And finally, if you don't take care of yourself or your family because of your behavior with pornography or your compulsive behavior with sex, you're hurting other people, right? If you don't take care of yourself financially because you spend an inordinate amount of money on escorts and strippers and OnlyFans and chat sites, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting your family. If you are spending a lot of time on pornography, whether your excuse is I'm addicted, whether it is I need it to de-stress, whether it's I don't have access to sex, my wife isn't having sex with me, so I gotta watch pornography, whatever your excuse is, if it is taking up time which could be spent with your kids, time which could be spent with your wife, time which could be spent on your finances or taking care of something that's a priority in your life. If you're not doing those things because of your preoccupation with pornography and your sexual behavior, then you're hurting others. Let's first talk about paying for sex. The most important point that I want to get across in this video is that paying for sex fuels the demand in sex trafficking. And here's how this works. Now you might be like, well, JK, I just once in a while I pay for sex, or paying for sex is legal in my city, whatever the case may be. I'm fully aware and I understand the argument as to how prostitution came about, how it is the oldest profession in the world next to sales. I understand all those things, but I also think it's important to understand that these days there are a lot of women, men, and children who are needlessly suffering because of the prevalence of high-speed internet pornography. See, when you view pornography and you get addicted to it, you get to a certain point where the regular vanilla stuff is not enough to satisfy you. So this is all the regular vanilla stuff. And as you become sensitized to it, you keep watching more and more taboo material. This is what gets you off. This is what hits those dopamine receptors. But the higher up you go, the more niche you go, the more taboo the material you're watching, the more unavailable it is in the real world. And while you might be a guy who's actually interested in changing his life, that's why you're watching this video, you want to understand how to minimize the control pornography has over you, you want to be educated about what's happening in the world when it comes to the pornography industry and the sex slave industry, while you may be that guy, I want you to understand that the vast majority of guys on this planet, millions and millions of men, they don't give a shit. They really think that people talking about sex addiction and porn addiction is a fucking joke. And I know some of you are immersed within this community. Many of you guys want to improve yourself, but I want you to know that there are not as many of us as you may think. The vast majority of men don't give a shit, are ignorant, and even if they were educated on it, they still prioritize sex for different reasons, cultural reasons, whatever the case may be. So those men are progressing just as you are. And there's actually no difference between them and you each time you view pornography. The only difference is you experience some regrets and they actually experience excitement and they want to take it to the next level. They enjoy this. They don't know that they're getting desensitized. They just feel that they're becoming better and better connoisseurs of their sexual experiences. So they end up getting to the point where they want to act out. When their partners cannot act out with them, when they cannot find other people outside who will engage in those things that they have been conditioned by pornography to enjoy, what are they going to do? They're going to start paying for it. Now, most men will quickly realize that some of the things that they want to do in pornography is actually fantasy that's being acted out. For instance, the girls who are underage in pornography, in most cases are not really underage. They might just be 18 or 21 or in their 20s and happen to look as if they're younger. Of course, there are many cases on many of the porn websites where they're actually younger girls who are illegally having sex and being filmed. But that's a story for another video. But these men want to have that experience. They quickly realize that it's illegal to do it in their country, especially if they're in the Western world. So what do? They start traveling to countries, to Southeast Asia, to South America, to Eastern Europe, to places where there aren't that many regulations against this type of behavior, where their money will go further, because many of them realize that they can't afford to pay women to do those things. And in many cases, many of the escorts, many of the providers of these things in Western world don't want to do those things with them or charge too much for it. So they migrate to places where this is possible. However, the demand for this increases. And when you view pornography and you keep watching pornography and your behavior keeps escalating, you add to that demand. And brothers, the bottom line is the demand is much more infinite than the supply. It is so much more. And so what happens? What happens when there are not enough women who are out there to satisfy the sexual needs of men, which have changed due to high-speed internet pornography? Well, it's a capitalistic world that we live in. There are people who are going to go out there and find and coerce women by different methodologies and get them to engage either in prostitution or in pornography against their will. And this happens so often. Thankfully, there are a lot of movements out there which are doing a great job of advocating and creating awareness about this, but they're not enough because the demand is too much and the pornography industry is too powerful and too big. And brothers, those of us that view pornography are playing our part in increasing that demand. Now, I know there's some arguments that are going to come up at this point, and one of the common arguments is that a lot of these women are going into this with their eyes open. They're not stupid. They fully understand that they are giving sex in return for money. And that's true. But if you're watching this video and you've been following me for a while, or anybody else that talks about out of control sexual behavior, you also began your journey with pornography feeling that it was something enjoyable and pleasurable. But you got to a certain point where you realized that there were diminishing returns to viewing pornography. It was hurting your life. What makes you think that that would be any different for a woman who is engaged in pornography? Remember the first time you started watching pornography? How amazing it was, how exciting it was, how pleasurable your orgasms were, because there were like so many genres, there were so many things you could do. And that's the crazy thing about high-speed internet pornography. It puts you in this infinite fantasy world where you can go every single day of your life and you could literally not watch the same pornography scene. Every day of your life you could go and you could watch something completely different. That is so seductive to people. And women feel the same way, right? You think about it, there's a young woman who's exposed to this thing, and she's invited on a casting call or whatever, and she realizes from a friend or from a boyfriend or somebody who meets her that she can make a little bit of money doing this. Now, this is a woman who's been conditioned to believe that her value comes from her beauty, her body, her vagina. So she's like, you know what, let me try this out once, okay? Doesn't mean that she's screwed up her life or it's the end of the world. Maybe she has sex with people, she's had sex with multiple partners, she's comfortable with her sexuality, and it's not a big deal. She goes for this thing. There's a cute guy, there's an attractive guy, there's a nice guy, there's a professional guy, whatever the case is, she gets filmed and she makes some money. And she's like, you know what, this isn't bad. I don't feel any shame, I don't feel unworthy. In fact, in many cases, I feel empowered because I had sex with somebody. I felt great about it, and I was told I was sexy, I was told I was attractive. I went and watched the videos and guys were saying how hot and how sexy I was, and I liked that kind of validation. And so she decides she's going to do it again and again and again, much like you decide you're going to watch pornography again and again and again because it makes you feel good. But what happens over time? Over time, she might realize that, hey, you know what? It's also diminishing returns. I am making some money, but at the same time, I'm not moving forward in other areas of my life because I've become so dependent on this way of making money. This doesn't require that much effort, let's say intellectual effort. I'm sure there's a different type of effort that goes into sex work. And so she may realize that there are diminishing returns. She may work with people who end up hurting her. She might end up being in an environment where she's exposed to certain different things like drugs. She may not like the changes that are happening to her. She may start facing stigma in society when people start recognizing her, when health providers won't work with her, when she has mental health issues which may or may not be related to her sex work. And she realizes that she's not taken seriously because of those issues. Well, it was your fault. You wanted to go and get fucked by a whole bunch of people, right? And so she decides that she's done with that and she wants to get out of that. Maybe she can't because now she's dependent on the money that she's making. Maybe she has a whole bunch of issues leaving that industry. Maybe she's ostracized. Maybe nobody respects her. Maybe she gets into a whole bunch of problematic relationships. I'll give you guys an example. Mia Khalifa, the porn star. From what I've heard, now she is advocating against the pornography industry. And a lot of people are coming out and saying things like, well, she went into that industry with her eyes open. JK, there are videos of this woman saying that she enjoys sex and how much she enjoys it. Listen, there was a time when I wanted to be a porn star, when I enjoyed sex so much, I enjoyed pornography so much. I was like, man, this would be a great part-time gig. Like, this would be fun because I enjoy sex. And if you spoke to me in those years, I would be as passionate about pornography as I am right now when it comes to helping men end their out of control sexual behavior. That you'd be like, wow, JK, you have two completely different points, but you are as passionate and as enthusiastic about pornography years ago as you are against compulsive behavior right now. But that was the way I was, and people changed. And I think once we understand that people can change, people's experiences can change, and what we see on a screen or what somebody says years ago is not a reflection of who they are today. And I think one of the things we're not doing is we're not taking time to pay attention to actually what is happening in our society. And it's difficult to do so when you're addicted to pornography. Why? Because when I was addicted to pornography, I was selfish. Only cared about myself, only cared about my sexual satisfaction. I didn't give a shit about what was happening to the women. The same thing showed up in my relationships with women. I didn't care. All I knew is that I wanted to bust a nut, and that was it, and she could fuck off. And that was the way I thought, until I started rebooting. Then I started thinking about other people. So brothers, it extends beyond that, and it becomes even a lot more complex when you have people now who are making amateur pornography because Pornhub encourages that, because they can make money, they can get famous, they get validation from that. We have things like OnlyFans where people can make money, where husbands, it's becoming so normalized, where husbands are encouraging their wives to get on OnlyFans, where mothers are getting on OnlyFans. And then people wonder, well, how could a mother become an escort? How could she become a prostitute? How could she be flying off to all these different locations to sexually service men? And how did her life fall apart? How did her kids grow up all fucked up? Well, this is how it happens. It's high-speed internet pornography. It's a new challenge that's facing humanity for the first time ever. And I know it sounds like I'm making it a big deal, like it's facing humanity. But when there's an entire underground industry that is trafficking people, that is buying young children from their parents, kidnapping them, getting them hooked on drugs in order for them to satisfy the sexual needs of men like us who were or are addicted to pornography, that's a big problem. It's happening right under our noses, and we're hurting people. So brothers, I know I went off a little bit today, but this is something I am passionate about. I'll probably be talking about this more and more as this industry unfortunately grows. I'm JK, your brother in this struggle. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I would like to hear your feedback and your comments in the comment section. I will read and respond to as many as I can. And if you enjoy these videos, I release 4 of them every week. Make sure you subscribe and click on the little bell icon to be notified every time I release a video. Thank you so much, and I'll speak to you later on in the week.